So, I want to talk today about the effects that Jesus had on the human race just by showing up, just by being Jesus, what the effects he had on us as human beings. And I want to start out by talking about some of the things that I've heard in the last week. This has all happened in the last week that I've heard people talk about when I, talk to them about Jesus. And some of the things that I've heard said. So the first thing that I'll talk about is about how, Christianity is like Buddhism, and it's pretty much the same thing as Buddhism. And we're all praying to the same God. But you have to remember that Jesus is really the center, and it says that no one goes to the Father, which is God, the one and only God, except through Jesus. So if you're not going through Jesus, then we're not praying to the same God as the Buddhists are. And Buddha, they mention Jesus in the Islamic Bible, and I'm not sure about exactly what it says about the Buddhist people, but I know a lot of those religions all mention Jesus. And they all say, yes, he's credible, yes, all this stuff. And Jesus says that he's the only one who's credible. So if everybody's pointing to Jesus and Jesus is pointing to himself, then it only makes sense to me just by, the collective information that I've heard from all these different religions, that Jesus is the answer. So that's where I would say that, we're not all praying to the same. It's not really like hippy dippy. It's not really like that, because it's Jesus in the flesh. Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, and he was talking about the God in heaven that he came from, the one and only God. And there's no way to get to him except through Jesus. Now, this might not have been true before Jesus came, but it happened. But it is true now that Jesus has already come and done what he did. It's history now. It's already over. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is people saying stuff that is not true about things that are in the Bible. And what I mean by not true is that they'll say, okay, we'll bring up homosexuality for an example. Homosexuality is never mentioned in the Bible. And when it was only mentioned in the Old Testament, and it was about, children and them being molested or something like that, which is absolutely not true. And if you want to know where you can find it, and I've also heard that only men are not allowed to be homosexuals, that it's okay if a woman does it, and that Jesus never said anything about that. I'm telling you that if you say that homosexuality is not in the Bible, that you're wrong. And that also leads me to believe that you've never read the Bible. And I promise you, if you read the Bible, then you read this book, the Holy Bible, the one with Jesus in it, where he dies as crucified and resurrected from the dead, and he says that through me that you will gain access to the Father, and all he has will be yours. If you read this Bible, you will find in Romans 1:26 and 27, and I hate to even do this, like, I'm not going to stand up here and like just totally speak this word at you and be like, I'm just letting you know that if you say homosexuality is not in the Bible, then that's not correct, because this says right here, because of this, and it was talking about in the previous text. I don't want to read this all to you because it would seem really bad, even though I am telling you the truth. It says in the text above about how God gave people over to their sinful desires because they weren't following his will. So it says specifically the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His internal and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. And it's saying that and it's pretty much talking about the wrath of God against mankind. But verse 26 and 27 say, because of this, God gave them over to their shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. If you don't think that that's talking about homosexuality, then I can't help you, because that is in this Bible, and that's just what it says. Like, I'm not the one who wrote the Bible, but I am going to say, and I am going to defend the Bible when it says, when somebody tells me that homosexuality is not a part of the Bible and you can just do whatever you want, because that's not how this works. That is not it. That is collusion and confusion. And some of the other things I've heard, I mean, those are the two big ones that I've heard in the last week. Those are two of the things that I've heard in the last week. But the topic of conversation that I wanted to talk about today, and that I had to address this because this is not something that I can, like, in good conscience, let people just go along their lives without speaking up and saying something about. What I wanted to talk about was the impact that Jesus had on the human race, just from showing up and doing what He did, and so we're kind of just gonna talk about the importance of Jesus, I suppose, is what else you could call this. But so we're just gonna think about this, because I haven't planned any of this. I don't have notes. I don't have a Bible like study reading plan thing. I just read the Bible. I know what the Bible says about God and about Jesus and about what I'm supposed to do, and then I go out and try and do it. And so, based on the knowledge that I have from the Bible, we'll talk about real stuff in real life, and not just this book, and we'll talk about real life. So, the first thing I'd like to say is that Jesus introduced the idea that somebody could be resurrected, and that things are possible that man wouldn't necessarily have ever thought was possible. And it's kind of cool, because when you start to think about the fact that resurrection could be real based on what Jesus said, depending on what you believe or not, that, okay, if resurrection is possible, then I really don't have to worry about dying. Like, I don't have to worry about death. I don't have to worry about any of that, because I know the person who I'm putting my trust in, who said, if you trust me, you'll have resurrection power inside of you, you'll have eternal life. Then I'm covered by death. Like, that's not an issue for me anymore. And I'm also talking about the same Jesus who says not to worry. He says that God provides for the birds, and then He asks them, He said, how much more important are you than a bird? And essentially He was saying God has got your back, and He told us, do not worry about what you're going to eat, about what you're going to drink. This is in Matthew 7:25 through 34, if you want to find the verse in the Bible. He's saying, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Verse 25 says, therefore I tell you not to worry about your life, what you'll eat, what you'll drink, about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? So Jesus is not only telling us things that we didn't know, He's also reminding us of the things we did know. And He's telling us, don't worry about it. he's saying because God cares about you and he loves you and he's on your side. If you're obedient and you're seeking him, then he's going to look after you. And you're like, Braxton, well, what happens if you're not? You heard what happened if you're not. When we read the thing about homosexuality, it says that God gives them over to a depraved mind. That if you want to do all the stuff that he said not to do, he's not going to stop you from doing it, because that's the beautiful part about this whole life, is that you have free will, and that love is a choice, and that if you don't choose God, then you don't love him, and like you're not going to get anything, you're not going to gain anything from him because you're not seeking him. And that's the beautiful thing about Jesus, is that he came down here and he offered us a piece of the pie, a piece of God that we can do for ourselves. Like we can experience God for ourselves, and we can join in with him, enter into his kingdom with him, and be a part of that. Like, you're talking about the dude who made the whole place that you're experiencing right now and you think is so much fun, and it is fun. He's the one who made it, and he's got a lot better stuff. Like, imagine if he can do all this, then imagine imagine what kind of stuff you could do with him. And that's a cool thing about Jesus. And then I've also, I forgot about this. I also heard that, every time we talk about, Jesus defended the prostitutes and Jesus defended the homosexuals. And that's correct, he did, but he didn't say that it was okay for them to do that, because people have told me that this week. They were like, I was like, but what about Jesus though? I was like, that's why I'm saying, like, homosexuality is in the Bible, and Jesus is saying that it's not biblical. I'm saying it's not biblical, and Jesus was saying don't do it. And he was saying, but Jesus defended the prostitutes and the sinners, and I said, yes, that's true, but look at what he said after he defended them in front of everybody, and then everybody left. This is John 8 about the adulterous woman, and this woman is caught in adultery, and she walks out of this house, and Jesus and they see Jesus is teaching that morning, and early in the morning, and then the Pharisees and the lawyers and the people who want to catch Jesus in a trap and show everybody that he's lying or whatever they were trying to do, saw this woman, and they were like, we're going to get him right here. And so they brought her to him, and they said, teacher, wise teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery, and by the law of Moses, we are able to stone her. It says, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and at dawn he appeared in the temple courts where all the people were gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and they made her stand up in front of the group, and they said to Jesus, teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery, and the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say? But they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger, and they kept questioning him, and he straightened up and said to them, if any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. So yes, he did defend her right there. He's defending her. Again, he stooped down and wrote in the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. So now they're alone. He defended her in front of everybody, and now that they're alone, Jesus says in verse 10, Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you. Jesus declared, go now and leave your life of sin. That is the last thing that this story talks about. That's the last line in there. Go now and leave your life of sin. So yes, he defended her, but he also told her to stop doing it. So that's kind of where, like, the problem is, when you start saying the stuff about how Jesus defended these people, and like he this is what he was about. It says right here what he was about, and that's what he said was, go now and leave your life of sin. That's why, like, I have problem when people say stuff like that, and it really irritates me, is because, like, that's why I'm saying, like, read the Bible and then you'll understand.